if you look at the trends for industry, the data is from our 2020 aluminum statistical review. Beyond the COVID disruption, the aluminum demand picture has been solid since post-2009. We did 2 consecutive record years of shipments in 2017 and 18 before a marginal drop off in 2019. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see demand drop during COVID was dramatic, but fairly brief. And by way of comparison, demand for aluminum dropped nearly 30% between 2007 and 2009. The decline last year was about 11%. So we were much more resilient than the Great Recession. And so through the first quarter of 2021, which is our latest available data, demand has recovered and is slightly above levels in the first quarter of 2020. So I can't see where the rest of the year goes, but net new orders are up dramatically, and anecdotally, we are hearing that, if anything, our members are struggling to keep up with new demand. So that's a good thing here in the U.S. And the upper right chart gives you a sense of how demand has dropped, but then rebounded quite sharply. So, and we think the future outlook is solid.
So what are the reasons for that, really? Well, there's fundamental and financial reasons. So the first one is very generally, that the industrial recovery that we're seeing first in China last year, and then driven primarily by the US and Europe into this year. And you can see that in manufacturing PMI data, still very strong kind of across those regions. The other factor really important for aluminium, more of a financial driver, is the dollar. Obviously, the dollar weakened quite substantially throughout 2020 and the early part of this year, and that's and it has this inverse relationship generally with commodity prices, but in this case in the chart you can see that quite clearly on aluminium. So that's been a key factor. And the third factor really that's I think really picks aluminium up so much this year has been the this rise of the decarbonisation agenda across the US, Europe, China. They're all kind of on the same page, as it were, with that agenda now, and that's hitting aluminium both on the supply side in terms of supply caps, efforts to reduce the energy use of aluminium, which is about 2% of electricity use globally, and then equally on the demand side as well. So there's all this optimism about we need to build infrastructure in terms of renewable energy, we need to move to electric vehicles, and that's got prospects for aluminium demand as well. It's aluminium that's going to be needed to really facilitate some of that transition as well. So that's been a key factor.
Okay, here are some key facts about change in China carbon neutrality policy by 2060 in purpose to achieve that goal. China pledged to strictly limit coal-fired power plants and to peak emissions by 2030 and coal use by 2025, all in purpose to achieve that carbon neutrality over the next 40 years. The carbon emissions from aluminium smelting amounted to 18% of total emissions in China last year, while steel production amounts 80% of those total emissions. So it will be very interesting how China will cope in following years with reducing emissions from steel industry, especially. Coal accounting for 85% of the energy used for aluminum smelting in China and 87% of the energy used in refining. China's aluminum smelters emitted 12.4 tons of CO2 per ton of produced aluminium on average from coal power plants last year, according to McKinsey. However, we know that some smelters using coal power plant energy in China even emitted 16 or even 18 tons CO2 per produced ton of aluminum. So decarbonization efforts require building of low carbon infrastructure, transmission grids, solar panels, wind turbines, and electric vehicles, and all that together will be strong support to aluminum, copper, nickel, and some other prices. And according to CRU, consumption of aluminum will grow by 40% between 2020 and 2030, while copper demand will grow by almost 300% during the period.
I think so. I think I think that historically, when it's been, I think the ratio is above 3, you start to get people thinking about substitution. I guess I mean, I'm not an expert specifically on, what the alternatives are. I know I've heard before about, high frequency electric cables, sort of, I think that's one of the areas where, you can substitute aluminium in. So I guess there are areas where you can already substitute for copper with aluminium. And I suppose the incentive to do that is increased with when the difference is where they're at the moment. I guess the interesting thing is, again, coming back to this decarbonisation argument, that if consumers are now looking at substituting from copper to aluminium because of the price, it's not just a price related argument anymore. People are starting to think more about carbon emissions as well. So, the fact that this whole debate around, how carbon intensive is aluminium production, and how quickly can the aluminium industry decarbonise, I imagine consumers are going to be following that theme and that debate quite closely, because it's going to factor into some of these kind of decisions around substitution more than perhaps they did in the past, where it was perhaps more of a focus just on the price difference.
It's sea forecasts differ. For instance, Antaike predicts it will be done by 2024, 2025, that will emissions peak limit, and they go down. But the broad process will be much longer than this, maybe 10 or 15 years to complete those switch to alternative energy sources. But for the difference, for example, Wood Mackenzie predicts peak of emissions will occur in 2030. So it's 5 years difference. So institutions, the leading institutions, really even differ in those key questions about prospects. And I think it is possible in some period, because it is, when those existing power plants, when they finish with their age, how to say it, when they finish their working age after 25 or 30 years, then they will not be renewed anymore. There will be switch to other energy sources, or if there is no hydro energy or some alternative energies close to those smelters, they will be connected to the grid. And grid will also use much more those alternative energies.